An 11-year-old girl vanished in broad daylight, walking to her school bus stop. And then, it was over in seconds. Police searched for weeks, then months, then years, and almost everyone believed she was gone for good. They were wrong. She was alive the whole time, hidden somewhere no one thought to look. Then, 18 years later, everything changed. One ordinary encounter cracked the case open, exposing a kidnapping almost too strange to believe. This is the story of Jaycee Dugard and the mistakes that kept her hidden in plain sight. It all began on a quiet morning, with a short walk she had taken 100 times. It was June 10th, 1991, in a quiet town called Myers, California, just south of Lake Tahoe. Jaycee Dugard was 11 years old, and she started up the hill toward her bus stop. The morning was bright and ordinary, and nothing about it felt wrong. Then a gray car rolled up beside her and slowed to a stop. The man behind the wheel leaned over, looking like he just needed directions. He didn't. He reached out with a stun gun, and a woman in the car moved fast, pulling Jaycee into the back seat. The doors shut, and the car pulled away. It happened in moments, too fast for anyone to react. 1 second she was on the sidewalk, and the next, she was gone. But this abduction had a witness. Jaycee's stepfather saw the whole thing, close enough to watch the car take her. He ran. He chased that car down the road on foot, pushing as hard as his legs would go. But the car was faster, and he never had a chance. Within hours, the response was massive. Police flooded the area. The FBI got involved. Helicopters went up, and volunteers fanned out across the hills. And they had something to work with: witnesses, a description of the car, and a rough idea of the two people inside. Sketches went out, and flyers went up everywhere. But then came the wall. The car was never traced, and the description led nowhere. No plate, no name, no suspect. Think about how strange that is. A child taken in daylight, in front of a witness who saw it happen. And still, the trail went completely cold. Weeks of searching turned up nothing solid, and the leads dried up one by one. The case slowed, then it stalled, and then it went quiet. Here's what nobody searching that summer knew. The man who took her wasn't a stranger to the system at all. They already had his name on file. Quick thing before we go deeper. This channel exists to break down the cases the system got wrong, the ones that never should have happened. Subscribe now, because over the next few minutes you're going to see how many times this man should have been stopped, and wasn't. So let's talk about the man who took her. His name was Philip Garrido, and he didn't act alone. His wife Nancy was in the car with him. And Garrido was not an unknown. He had a record, a serious one, because years before Jaycee, he had done this before. In 1976, he abducted a young woman and took her across the state line into Reno, Nevada. He assaulted her there. He was caught, and he was convicted. The sentence was 50 years. 50. That should have kept him locked away for most of his life. But here's the number that matters. He didn't serve 50 years. He served 11. And in 1988, he was released on parole. Now hold that timeline against Jaycee. He took her in 1991, just 3 years after he walked free. And he didn't walk free quietly. He was a registered sex offender and an active parolee. On paper, he was being supervised. So what was supervision supposed to look like? Scheduled visits to his home, his address on file with multiple agencies, and later, a GPS unit strapped to his ankle. Parole agents were assigned to him, sheriff's deputies could pull his record, and federal authorities had tracked him for years. The man was, in theory, watched. That's what makes this case different. This was not a drifter who slipped off the map, and this was not a man hiding in some remote wilderness. He had a home with an address. He had officers checking in, and he had a file with his name on it. And yet, he hid a kidnapped child anyway. The system designed to flag exactly this kind of man was already pointed right at him. It simply never looked in the right place. So the question stops being where he hid her. It becomes how he hid her, a few feet from people whose entire job was to check. Picture an ordinary street, regular houses, mowed lawns, cars in the driveways. One of those houses sat at 1554 Walnut Avenue, in the town of Antioch, California. It had neighbors on 3 sides, and from the street, it looked like nothing. But behind that house was a second world, a hidden one, and almost nobody knew it was there. Back there sat a cluster of tents, sheds, and lean-tos thrown together from scrap, and one shed built to keep sound from getting out. This wasn't sloppy, it was deliberate. Every piece of it was designed to stay invisible. Start with the fence, 6 feet tall. Add tall trees crowding the property line, and an entrance to the back section covered by a tarp. And the buildings themselves were placed with care, positioned to block the sight lines, to cut off every angle a person might look from. Investigators later confirmed how well it worked. You could stand on that property, you could walk right through it, and you would never know the back section existed. This was where Jaycee was held, for years, and over those years 2 daughters were born there. Garrido was the father. 2 children, growing up inside that fence, knowing nothing of the world on the other side of it. So understand what this place really was. Not a cabin deep in the mountains, not a bunker in the desert. A suburban backyard, screened from the world by design. If you're sitting there wondering how this stayed hidden for 18 years, you are asking the exact question that made an entire state apologize. Subscribe right now, because what comes next is the part that's almost harder to believe than the crime itself, the times someone nearly found her. That concealment is also why early checks failed. An officer could glance into the yard, and he'd see a porch, he'd see a shed, he'd see nothing wrong. And technically, he wasn't lying. He just never saw the part that mattered. The design did exactly what it was built to do. Because here's the truth that turns this from a tragedy into a scandal. People did knock on that door, more than once. This is the part of the story that's hard to sit with, because the clues were there, again and again. Start in 2002. The Antioch Fire Department got a call. A child had been hurt in a pool at the home, and they responded. A child, at the house of a registered sex offender. But that detail never traveled. The fire call never reached his parole office, and the pieces stayed separate. Then there was the parole agent. He actually saw a young girl on the property, around 12 years old, right there in front of him. Garrido had an answer ready. He said she was his brother's daughter, and the agent took him at his word and moved on. But it wasn't true. Garrido's brother would later tell authorities something simple. He didn't have any children. The story fell apart, years too late. Now to the clearest chance of all. On November 30th, 2006, a neighbor picked up the phone and called 911. She told them people were living in tents in the backyard. She said there were children out there, and she warned that Garrido was unstable. A sheriff's deputy was sent out. He arrived at the home and spoke with Garrido in the front yard. He decided nothing criminal was going on, and he left. He never went into the backyard. He never even asked to see it, the exact place that 911 call was pointing to. He stopped at the front of the house. Forgettable. And here's the detail that makes it sting. That deputy didn't know who he was talking to. He had no idea Garrido was a registered sex offender, because the records simply weren't connected. And this wasn't a one-time slip either. Over the years, parole agents came to that home again and again. They looked toward the back, and they saw a porch, they saw a shed, and they left satisfied. Years later, the state reviewed all of it. A formal Inspector General report laid out the failures in detail, visits that checked the boxes but never checked the yard. So step back and look at the whole picture. The fire department had a piece, the sheriff had a piece, parole had a piece, and the registry had a piece. Every agency held one part of the truth, and not one of them ever put the parts together. That's what kept her hidden. Not one big mistake, but a dozen small ones, nobody connected. In the end, it wasn't a detective who broke this case. It wasn't the GPS, the registry, or 18 years of parole visits. It was a strange afternoon on a college campus, and 2 people who simply paid attention. After 18 years of missed chances, the break came from nowhere. Not from a detective, but from a college campus. It was August 2009, at the University of California, Berkeley. Garrido showed up to promote a religious project of his own making, and he didn't come alone. He brought the two girls with him. Two campus employees crossed paths with him that day. One managed special events, and the other was a campus police officer. And something about the scene felt wrong. The girls were too quiet, too passive. They stood there strangely flat, while Garrido did all the talking. The whole picture was off. So the officer did one simple thing. She ran his name, and the screen told a story Garrido never wanted seen. He was a federal parolee, a registered sex offender. The girls were with a man under active supervision, and they flagged it straight to his parole agent. That flag set the ending in motion. His parole officer ordered him in. "Come to the Concord office," he was told, "and bring the girls." Garrido came. But he didn't come with just the girls. Nancy was with him, and so was a quiet young woman he introduced under a false name. Investigators started asking questions, and the answers didn't line up. The story bent, then buckled, then broke. And finally, Garrido confessed. Then the young woman spoke for herself. She set the false name aside and gave them her real one. Jaycee, the girl missing for 18 years, was sitting in that room. Now the case had to be locked down with evidence. Investigators got a warrant for the Antioch property and documented the hidden compound in full. Then came the forensic piece that ended any doubt. DNA paternity testing on the two daughters. The results confirmed Garrido was the father, and a confession backed by science can't be walked back. The justice was straightforward. In 2011, both pleaded guilty. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life, and Nancy Garrido received 36 years to life. And the state that failed her paid for it. California agreed to a $20 million settlement, compensation for the supervision that never worked. But the most important part isn't the sentence. It's what Jaycee did with the life she got back. She took her real name, and she kept it. She told her own story, in her own words. She raised her two daughters out in the open. No fence, no hiding. The choices were finally hers. And it all turned on one ordinary moment. A name typed into a database. 18 years of supervision couldn't find her. A single records check did. Jaycee Dugard was found because two strangers refused to look away. That's the whole reason this channel exists. To keep these cases loud, so the next warning sign actually gets checked. Subscribe and help make sure the next missing kid is found in days, not in decades.